Imagine you wake up to breaking news that a global prize famous for honoring peace and moral courage has entered the rough arena of power politics. Not a military alliance, not a secret treaty, but a gold medal and a speech in Oslo. Some say that prize is a velvet glove for a steel hand. Others say it is one of the last neutral forums left on Earth. Tonight, we are going to interrogate a claim pulsing through conversations across Africa, Europe, and the United States, that the Nobel Prize, especially the Peace Prize, is not just an award but a strategic instrument, a subtle trap set by the most influential economies on the planet. We are going to examine who actually runs the prize, how it gets decided, who nominates whom, and how the aura of global virtue can sway narratives, alter career arcs, and even reshape policy in fragile states and great powers alike. We will test this claim against the lived reality of the Sahel, where Captain Ibrahim Traoré's rise in Burkina Faso has electrified a region and divided the world's commentators. By the end, you will have the tools to decide whether the prize is a trap, a torch, or something far more complicated. Start with the mystique. The Peace Prize feels like the world's microphone. It can catapult a name from regional headlines to the front page of every major paper. It gives a platform that can energize movements or cool insurgent fires. Recipients step into a bright light that encourages moderation to look like statesmanship and dissent to look like obstruction. This is not unique to the Nobel. All prestigious awards carry that risk. But the Nobel has a special chemistry, a long history, a Scandinavian imprimatur of fairness, and a ritual that feels older than geopolitics and higher than partisan noise. Now look behind the curtain. The Peace Prize is not awarded by a global parliament. It is selected by a small committee based in Oslo. Nominations are confidential for decades. The halo is real. The process is deliberately insulated. That insulation cuts both ways. Critics see it as a bubble that can be influenced by Western media narratives and think tank currents. Defenders see it as protection against short-term political browbeating. The outcome is the same, a decision that can change reputations overnight with almost no public transparency about who pushed which names or why at each stage. Awards are not tanks, but they are power. Soft power is the ability to shape the preferences and behavior of others without force or outright bribery. It comes from ideas, culture, and the perception of legitimacy. And honor can seduce. It can flatter a leader into polishing rough edges for an international audience. It can separate a movement from its most radical supporters by rewarding the faces willing to speak the language of compromise, development partners, and global governance. Whether you believe that is good statecraft or subtle co-optation often depends on where you sit. There is a long record of prizes that aged badly or beautifully depending on how history unfolded. There have been awards to leaders at hopeful moments who later presided over conflict and abuse. There have also been awards that stiffened spines and protected dissidents when it mattered most. The lesson is not that the prize is always right or always wrong. The lesson is that the prize is part of politics. The moment a medal lands on a podium, campaigns, ministries, insurgents, donors, and opposition figures all recalculate. Now, to the heart of today's argument. In parts of West Africa, a new narrative has taken root. Global institutions and Western alliances still shape the weather, even when they no longer control the climate. After coups in the Sahel, new leaders promised sovereignty from old patrons and framed their projects as decolonization in real time. That message resonates with audiences tired of insecurity, indebtedness, and external lectures. It also alarms Western policymakers who see Russian and other actors stepping into any vacuum. Between these two forces sits a public hungry for safety and dignity and a prize that can amplify whichever side captures the moral story of the hour. Burkina Faso is a vivid case study for this debate. A junior officer becomes head of state and frames his mission as national salvation against jihadist violence, corruption, and foreign meddling. Foreign troops are told to leave. Contracts and concessions get scrutinized. Flags, speeches, and symbolism move markets of emotion across a continent. Supporters hail the rise of a proud patriot channeling the spirit of Thomas Sankara and promising to put local people ahead of foreign companies. Critics counter that the security picture has gotten worse, that civil liberties are shrinking, and that the state's embrace of new patrons may trade one dependency for another. Both sides reach for global language, sovereignty, dignity, stability, democracy. Both sides accuse the other of wearing a mask. If a leader in this position were to be nominated or even rumored for an international prize, what would happen? First, rumor itself is a weapon. Because the nomination lists are sealed for a lifetime, anyone can claim or deny almost anything and let the perception do the work. Second, a rumor or an award can split coalitions. Hardline supporters may see moderation as betrayal. Pragmatic supporters may relish the recognition and the doors it opens. Third, an honor can trigger international conditionality. Donors, lenders, and watchdogs love a hook. An award can become a benchmark to demand certain behaviors while punishing others. Fourth, rival powers read the signal. If a Western-leaning committee honors a figure, a non-Western patron may either tighten its embrace to prevent drift or step back and watch if the new laureate softens their rhetoric to keep the applause. This is what people mean when they say a prize can be a trap. It is not a trap like a cage, it is a trap like a stage. The stage is built for lines that please a particular audience. Step onto it, and you may feel pressure to perform. The applause is loud. The lights are hot. And when the scene changes, the same audience may turn and judge you by a script they wrote, not by the realities you face at home. But calling the Nobel a trap assumes coordination that may not exist. It assumes that the prize committees take orders from the richest democracies, that newspapers and universities and foundations move like a choir, and that public opinion in Europe and America can be neatly directed. That is a large claim. It is more accurate, and more interesting, to see the prize as a node in a dense network of institutions and narratives that often rhyme with the values of prominent Western states. Those states do not own that network, but they are fluent in it. They fund many of the conferences, sponsor many of the fellowships, and set many of the terms of debate and media ecosystems that shape how the world talks about peace and justice. You do not need a phone call from a government minister to feel those currents. If you work in this space, you breathe them. Return to the Sahel. The governments of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have sought to reconfigure alliances, exit a regional bloc they felt was compromised, and ink a new security compact among themselves. In parallel, Russia has moved instructors and equipment into the region under a rebranded structure that replaced a notorious private military network. European governments warn of a widening vacuum. Human rights organizations document abuses by both militants and state forces. Civilians suffer most. In that brutal fog, a prize can look absurd, like handing a laurel to someone standing in a storm. Or it can look powerful, like a shield that invites international scrutiny and resources for stabilization. The same medal reads as provocation to some, as protection to others. Does any of this mean the Nobel Committee would even consider a polarizing Sahel leader for an award? The historical pattern suggests the committee often reaches for moments of hope, ceasefires, or moral clarity. It also suggests misfires when hope collapses. Awarding a figure who is consolidating power in the middle of an insurgency, with contested human rights records and major geopolitical patrons watching closely, would be a high-risk move for a body that prizes its reputation for conscience. Yet the very rumor forces a conversation. What would count as peace in the Sahel? A détente with militants? A negotiated regional security framework? A credible roadmap back to civilian rule? A stabilizing economic plan that reduces the appeal of insurgent recruitment? If an award cannot answer those questions, it should at least spark them. Here, it is important to separate two claims. One, that the Nobel can act as soft power in line with elite Western preferences. Two, that it is a coordinated trap set by a club of powerful economies. The first is plausible in a loose, cultural sense, the second is a leap. Influence does not require conspiracy. It only requires alignment across media, academia, finance, and diplomacy that often comes from shared assumptions. Those assumptions, in turn, grow from prosperity, security, and networks of education and exchange. At times, they also reflect blind spots and double standards. If you are a leader who rejects those assumptions, a prize can feel like a velvet leash. If you embrace them, a prize can feel like a validation you fought hard to earn. Think about incentives. If you are a reformer trying to move a traumatized society towards stability, a global honor can help you sell compromise to hard men with guns and to citizens who are tired of empty promises. If you are a revolutionary trying to tear down a corrupt order, a global honor can soften your edge in ways that please foreign editors but alienate your base. If you are a patron state trying to keep influence without deploying troops, you would love to see your preferred interlocutors wrapped in legitimacy. If you are a rival power, you might reward louder resistance and offer security equipment with fewer lectures. In every case, the prize is a lever, not a chain. People still make choices. They just make them with new incentives on the table. Now bring it back to you, the viewer in the United States, watching uprisings and realignments far away and wondering why any of this matters. It matters because it teaches us how legitimacy is manufactured and traded. It matters because awards shape textbooks, and textbooks shape voters, and voters shape foreign policy. It matters because a medal on the news can make a community in another continent feel seen or betrayed. It matters because American and European institutions are wrestling with how to engage regions where their prestige is slipping. It matters because whether you work in journalism, development, security, or business, your mental map of who is a hero and who is a spoiler can be tilted by a ceremony you did not vote in. So what would a wiser approach look like for everyone in this story? If you run a prize committee, you would double down on transparency around criteria even if you cannot publish names. You would publish more reasoning after the announcements to make your moral logic legible and to invite honest debate rather than mystery. If you are a leader in a conflict zone, you would treat any global honor as a microphone, not a medal. Use it to make concrete commitments you can be judged by at home, not just admired for abroad. If you are a Western policymaker, you might think twice before using awards as a proxy for strategy. Legitimacy imported from Oslo does not substitute for security delivered in villages or accountability delivered in courts. If you are a rival power, you might question whether lending guns without governance is a path to anything but deeper chaos that will eventually harm your own interests. And if you are a citizen anywhere, you would push past the headlines and ask for proof that the people draped in virtue are also delivering results. Let's also face the uncomfortable reality that insurgencies exploit our attention economy. When violence spikes, the world looks away if there is no dramatic image. Awards try to correct that by pulling cameras towards stories of courage. But when awards are handed out amid active conflict, they can look like a vote for a narrative rather than for an outcome. The measure of peace is not a speech, it is whether children can sleep without fear, whether farmers can reach their fields, whether schools open and stay open, whether dissidents can argue without disappearing. That is not glamorous. That is the daily work of statecraft. No medal can replace it. There is a final layer many people miss. The Nobel committees are Scandinavian, but the conversation around nominations and shortlists flows through global networks, universities, policy institutes, rights groups, faith communities, diaspora organizations, and diplomats who whisper and write and publish. A leader from the Sahel who leans against one set of powers will be celebrated in other parts of the world and demonized in others. A prize in that context can either heal by recognizing a universally defensible act or inflame by appearing to reward a faction. You cannot remove that risk. You can only be honest about it. If you are Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the calculus is delicate. Accept symbolic validation from global institutions, and you might gain leverage with lenders and humanitarian actors who can help stabilize the countryside. Reject it on principle, and you double down on a story of unbending sovereignty that thrills your supporters and frightens investors. Either way, the people who matter most are the citizens caught between militants and soldiers. They will judge not by medals or speeches but by the arrival of calm, the return of markets, the reopening of clinics, and the freedom to dissent without fear. Before we go to your voice, a final caution that should be obvious but often gets lost: rumor is not reality. Anyone can boast of nominations. Anyone can claim to speak for a committee. Until there is an announcement, there is no award. Until there is a sustained improvement in people's lives, there is no peace. And until the institutions that give out honors learn to narrate their decisions more clearly, suspicion will fill the silence. What do you think? If you were offered a platform that could help your people but might also steer you toward a softer line internationally, would you take it? If you were running a prize meant to honor peace, would you wait for results or reward momentum? And if you are a citizen watching all this, do awards help you focus on the right stories, or do they distract you from the hard details that actually change lives? If you watched until now, here are the questions I want you to weigh in on. Do global prizes like the Nobel calm conflicts by rewarding dialogue, or do they freeze conflicts by rewarding image over substance? If a leader in the middle of a war accepts a moral accolade, does that acceptance make it easier or harder to hold them accountable for abuses? Which past award do you think most clearly shows the danger of celebrating too soon, and which one shows the power of recognition to protect the vulnerable? If the committee wanted to meaningfully improve the Sahel, what specific conditions would you demand before honoring anyone? Do you believe a prize can co-opt a leader, or does it simply reveal who they already are? And finally, if you were designing a new award to support real peace in the Sahel, what would its rules be, and who would sit on its jury? If this conversation challenged your assumptions, stay with this channel. AfriPol Lens is committed to digging beneath slogans and looking steadily at incentives, institutions, and the people who bear the consequences. Subscribe for future deep dives. Like this video if it helped you think in new ways, and share it with someone who cares about West Africa, global governance, or the hidden ways soft power moves the world. Tell us in the comments whether you believe the Nobel is a trap, a torch, or a mirror, and what evidence would change your mind either way. As we close, one request to all viewers: resist the easy thrill of heroes and villains. Reward the leaders who deliver safety without terror, who pursue sovereignty without crushing dissent, and who speak to their own people with the same respect they demand from the world. Prizes can bless that work, but only citizens can insist on it.